New book. Starting check.in from Douluo continent has been released. Traveling through the Douluo continent, Ji Fei, who had originally achieved nothing, unexpectedly awakened the divine-level martial soul, Chaos. This instantly ignited Ji Fei's passion, but a quick sentence that you lacked soul power shattered all brief fantasies. No soul power. Even if it's not, what's wrong? You will eventually realize the pain I've brought you. Oh. Are you also a transmigrator? Do you have a system? Is the first soul ring from 1,000 years old or something else? Wait a moment, I'll spit out a 100,000-year-old soul ring and see if the soul skill effect is stronger than yours. Do you want me to show mercy and give you a few more 100,000-year-old soul rings to absorb for the system owner? Legend of Soul Master, become famous in one battle. The inheritance of gods, if you want to wear a crown, you must bear its weight. White Tiger Dai Mubai, Shura Tang San, Rugu Xiaowu, Phoenix Mahongjun, Netherworld Zhu Zhuqing, Food God Oscar, Nine-Colored Ning Rongrong. In the end, they can only be transformed into legends of Douluo. Tang San, we used to be the best brothers, but ultimately we could only be at odds. Although your Tang clan is united in heart, we can still not compete with our 7 great situations. Tang Hao. When you told me the truth back then, you should have expected that you would die today. The so-called Haotian is just like that. See God. Shura God. Tang San. Even if your 2 divine positions blend perfectly today, you will inevitably die. This is a legend about playing Douluo, and for countless years thereafter, all soul masters can only listen to his past charm from the legend. Keywords of the novel. Douluo Jiwa Wuhuan is a system without pop-ups. Douluo Jiwa Wuhuan is a complete download of the system's TXT, and Douluo Jiwa Wuhuan is the latest chapter for reading. Chapter 1. 7 choices at the beginning. Do you want the system or grandpa? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. 7 choices at the beginning. Do you want the system or grandpa? Anyway, it's just that there's no direct invincibility. Douluo continent, southwest of the Tiando Empire, Fasno province. Holy Soul Village. If you only listen to its name, then you will want to curse, thinking to yourself, it's such an old routine, old plot, old licking dog, old tool man. No, 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 this is called old wine in old bottles. How could we writers write the same thing? Just like the name of this village, Holy Soul. According to Jack, the village chief, who once told us that when we trace back to the ancient times, there was a soul saint level powerhouse in this village, which is the pride of everyone in Holy Soul Village. Moreover, according to the numerous small stories passed down by the soul saint, it has been included as a major measure in the early childhood education of the Holy Soul Village. The sky was slightly bright, and a faint yellow light in the distance illuminated the horizon. On the hillside outside the Holy Soul Village in the distance, 2 figures faintly sat on the rocks, breathing long and soothing. 2 thin figures were rendered by the gradually rising faint light in the distance, pulled in and looked as if they were 2 teenagers. The boy on the left seems to frequently withstand the warmth of the sun, with a healthy wheat color on his skin. His short black hair looks sharp, and although his clothes are simple, they are clean and neat. Looking at the boy on the right, his sleepy eyes were yawning, and he exuded a lazy feeling all over his body. Compared to the boy next to him, his skin was even fair, and his short hair, which was slightly restrained, was also very regular. The clothes he wore for repairing Ding Ding were also comfortable. Young mistress, it's too boring for you to come here all day. Isn't it good to count sheep, chickens, and stars with me at home? You told my uncle to exercise, but I feel that your exercise method is not right. Watching the sun can easily cause myopia, and it's easy to blur your vision. It's better to learn how to iron with my uncle. Look at how hot I am now. The boy on the right stretched his long waist and joked to the boy beside him. GGE's words are not accurate. My cultivation method naturally has unique aspects. Although what Ji Gu said is also true, forging iron is indeed a good way of cultivation. However, in my opinion, forging iron should ultimately be the art of making a living. To make a living, one must first improve one's own body. Tang San smiled slightly, closed his eyes slightly, and a faint purple light flickered past before looking at the Ji Gu, he said. Ji Gu. Full name Ji Fei, nicknamed by the villagers, Chicken Flying Egg Beat. It seems like a child adopted by his own father when he was a child. Although it's not biological, it feels even closer than his own biological child, and growing up together since childhood, Tang San's feelings towards Ji Fei can be summed up in one word. Broken jar, broken throw. No matter what she does, Ji Fei's first consideration is whether she is tired, whether it is beneficial to herself, and whether there will be any irreversible consequences if she does it. TSK, the third son also knows how to make a living. It's not bad, but you will regret your words in the future. Ji Fei propped up with one hand and then stood up directly, looking into the distance. You practice first, I'll go shush shush shush, and then I'll wait for you first. It's quite cold on this high slope, and I'll have to cook over a fire when I go home later. Tang San smiled slightly and spread his hand, saying, Ji Gu, you're wrong. I should be cooking and you can start the fire. Actually, I can do it myself. Ah, you don't have to be polite, young mistress. I'll help you with the technique of forging iron and burning fire. Isn't that too formal? After all, the saying goes that food is the top priority for the people, and safety comes first. Speaking, Ji Fei hummed an unknown tune and walked towards the distance. Food is the paramount necessity of the people. Tang San muttered repeatedly, then looked up deeply at Ji Fei, who was gradually disappearing from sight, and shook his head. Ji Gu is Ji Gu, and it feels like what Tang Elder said before is much more profound. Alas, I have also suffered. This mountain slope is so high. Alas, the third son is truly worthy of it. He walks smoothly up and down the slope, and if you look at me again, I have to work so hard down the slope. Ji Fei, who was using both hands and feet, slowly descended from the slope, and then his gaze rested on Tang San, who was sitting on a rock and entering a state of cultivation, and he shook his head helplessly. The arduous journey. They are all travelers, why does it feel like the difference is so big? I feel like I just don't understand, sir. Sigh, besides knowing a little bit about the plot of Douluo continent, I feel like I'm useless. If God gives me another chance to start over, I will definitely reread the original work and understand the causes and consequences of everything, and I will never climb mountains again. Ji Fei walked slowly and leisurely, the waves in her heart were towering, but to put it simply, it was all helplessness and tears. Dripping tears. Originally, in the new era of the 21st century, he should have lived a peaceful and air-conditioned life with a roll of paper, but unfortunately, he insisted on climbing mountains for nothing. Alas, looking back now, it was really that the old birthday star was hanged, and it seemed that he had undoubtedly fallen off a cliff according to the dog blood plot, and then we arrived at such a haunted place. Ji Fei, fi, even chicken flying eggs. How come I don't remember such a name in the original work? It seems that even the most basic dragon set can't be considered, right? Although I accidentally climbed the line of Tang Hao, it seems that it's not enough for me to play with the situation of the entire Douluo continent, right? Shouldn't all the time travel talk be giving me a system or grandpa's? I've been waiting for years, and there hasn't been any ghost shadow. Ji Fei also knows Tang San's identity, so she has been following Tang San's side to see if we can learn one or two unique Tang sect skills from him. It's okay to give me a set of even worse internal skills. But the ideals are full and the reality is bone deep. This mistress's ability to keep secrets can be said to be seamless. Even Tang Hao doesn't know what his own son has been up to. In the past, Reading those dog-blooded novel plots would definitely bring some benefits if you followed the protagonist crazily, but now it seems like they are all just bullshit-licking dogs. Ji Fei sneered. Are you almost 6 years old? Are you about to awaken your martial soul? Damn it, I remember that the third son is a twin martial soul. I've been so unlucky that I won't awaken any hoe or axe in the end, will I? It's better to awaken a hammer and inherit Tang Hao's craftsmanship. After searching for a relatively secluded place, Ji Fei sat down under a big tree and waited quietly for Tang San's cultivation to end. Usually, Tang San's cultivation was based on 1 hour, so she didn't rush back. Besides, at this time, Tang Hao probably slept soundly than anyone else. Perhaps this is the life that the title Douluo should have. Dull and uninteresting from what Ji Fei was doing now, she could just see Tang San's figure reflected by the faint light. Ji Fei's heart was also increasingly moved, as all of this was too hasty. Tang San, the son of the authentic era and the future god of the sea, the Shura god, turned red with anger upon his crown. After losing consciousness for a moment, Ji Fei also showed helplessness. Is it possible that she, who is nothing, can only become a supporting figure? Impossible. At least I am also a traveler, how could I become a supporting figure? This is absolutely impossible. I, Ji Fei, can only be the Ji Fei above tens of thousands of people. Forget about the dream, let's wait until I awaken my martial soul before we talk. Now, I'll just burn the fire honestly. After the third son finds out about the true fragrance forging iron series, maybe I can learn Tang Hao's chaotic cloak hammer technique while burning the fire nearby. It's not that Ji Fei doesn't want to learn how to forge iron, but rather that ordinary forging techniques obviously don't have much effect on him, and advanced hammering techniques like the chaos cloak hammer technique don't seem to be taught to an outsider by Tang Hao, right? Although I grew up with Tang San since childhood, when it comes to myself, I am not biological. The difference is still so big. How spicy. Alas, it's just some small plans after all. Even if I accidentally learned the chaos cloak hammer technique, what would happen? It's just laying the groundwork for me to become a true blacksmith in the future. What ultimately determines my fate is what the martial soul can awaken to. Don't be such a useless martial soul, my fate is already tragic enough. But I should also believe that there are no useless martial souls, only useless soul masters. But this doesn't seem to make sense either. If you awaken a scythe soul, it's just trash to say. It doesn't really mean anything. Is it possible that you're using a scythe as a strong attack type soul master? Waving your scythe to charge into battle? Or are you using a scythe as a control type soul master? Standing on the arena and saying to your opponent, don't move, I'll cut you off as a leak if you move. Ji Fei's face darkened as she thought about it. What kind of things are all about Nima? It's simply not living. Relying under the big tree, Ji Fei slightly closed her eyes, surrounded by numerous blue-silver grasses swaying her thin and weak body in the gentle breeze. Compared to the dull and comfortable life of being titled Douluo, Ji Fei's life is portrayed as a chicken flying and an egg beating, but it's just such a moment. Ding dong, congratulations on being selected as the invincible golden finger of Douluo continent. Please make a specific selection for the golden finger. Option 1. Golden Finger Grandpa Soul Blessing, originally the level 99 ultimate title Douluo, which passed away from Douluo continent, possesses comprehensive knowledge of soul master cultivation. Option 2. The system will be set up immediately to enjoy the life of salted fish and forge iron for a lifetime. Option 3. Awakening the selection system and obtaining corresponding rewards based on one's own choices. Option 4. Awakening the judgment system and obtaining corresponding rewards based on one's own judgment. Option 5. Awakening summoning system, where the host gains the opportunity to summon tasks through hard work. Option 6. Obtain a special martial soul. Through your own efforts, get rid of the title of salted fish and achieve the beautiful dream of truly awakening the power of the world. Option 7. You voluntarily give up your golden finger and choose to become a noble person. Looking at the 7 bright red choices gathered in front of her, Ji Fei's expression suddenly became excited. Her flushed face seemed to want to shout, "My life is up to me, not to heaven." 7 choices. 7 choices. It looks like everyone is really awesome, except for the 7th one. What is the use of aloofness in this world? Can it be eaten as a meal? Can you help me achieve my life goals? Guapi. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. I really threw chicken eggs into the air. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. I really threw chicken eggs into the air. A whole 7 lines of big characters. 7 full options. Ji Fei's face turned red and she clenched her fists tightly, her breath becoming heavier. Heaven will not abandon me. Ah. The system dad is here. Ji Fei looked at the 7 options and quickly began to ponder. All 7 options seemed to have their pros and cons, and she needed to think carefully about them. A set of random systems. Ji Fei quickly shook her head and removed this option. There's no other reason, this option is too unreliable. In that moment, some inexplicable words flooded into Ji Fei's mind. Ding dong, the system will explode together with the host in 5 seconds. Ding dong, the host needs to eat oligo every day, otherwise they will self-destruct and die. Useless system. At the thought of these things, Ji Fei couldn't help but shudder. These things are too strange, so it's better not to touch them. Otherwise, if she really gets something that kills her type of existence, wouldn't she have nowhere to cry? Blessed by a level 99 title Douluo Grandpa. Just like before, Ji Fei decisively erased this option. The uncertainty of this old man is too great. What if this damn thing brings itself a fierce and evil spirit? If I give up myself again, I will be extremely miserable, and it's the kind of unreasonable and inexplicable sorrow. Moreover, based on Ji Fei's own experience of fully reading poetry and books, the old grandfather is in too much trouble. What if he waits for himself to grow up in the future and allows himself to reshape his physical body? And this is the Douluo continent. This is a place where martial souls are the cornerstone. There is no poisonous chicken soup here that can be successful as long as one is willing to work hard. What is the most fundamental aspect of a person? Without a doubt, it must be a martial soul. If you can't awaken a powerful martial soul yourself, what if even the title Douluo from all over the continent comes to be your master? The hoe is always returned as the hoe, and the sickle is ultimately a sickle. What 30 years in the East and 30 years in the West, don't deceive young people into poverty. It's all nonsense. The version that Ji Fei knows should look like this. 30 years later, Hedong will still be Hedong, Hashi will still be Hashi, they will still be that towering genius, and you have always been just a lowly useless material. Choosing a system. It seems like there's something. There's also a lot of uncertainty. Judging the system. There seems to be something. Uncertainty factors are also significant. Summoning system. It seems like there's nothing to it. If I want to pursue a higher realm, I naturally need the blessing of my own martial soul. Even if you summon the Creator God for me, it's useless. I can't live long on my own, so why should I choose you? Although Ji Fei may not be considered a shrewd strategist, she also knows that only by living for a long time can she enjoy it, as there are too many uncertainties in the system. If there is a system that can directly give Ji Fei an unlimited lifespan, Ji Fei will not hesitate to choose this option. Unfortunately, there was no so next, awakening a special martial soul. Achieving life goals through one's own efforts. Quickly, Ji Fei began to analyze the pros and cons of this. Besides the chance of dying early on the path of cultivation, how much chance do I have of becoming a title Douluo myself? Although I have already climbed to the level of Tang San, it is obvious that I am not a woman and cannot rely on the side of the third son. Therefore, I still need to work hard on my own, and I, Ji Fei, have no servility. Since I have traveled through time, I can naturally walk out of my own path to heaven. And while Ji Fei was still hesitating which of these 7 choices he should choose, Tang San had already completed his cultivation. With 2 or 3 agile steps, he climbed down the mountain slope in an instant. Compared to Ji Fei's clumsy movements, Tang San was completely like a natural level. Tang Sansi looked around, seemingly searching for the trace of Ji Fei. While walking, he still remembered the path of operating his own Xiantian gong. Ji Gu. Looking at Ji Fei standing under the big tree in the distance, who seemed to be stunned, Tang San shouted loudly. Seeing that Ji Fei did not answer him, Tang San smiled slightly. He had a plan and wanted to come over and scare himself, Ji Gu. Slowly, the ghostly shadows under her feet began to spread, and soon several remnants were drawn and swept towards Ji Fei's side. What's good to choose? It's so complicated. Why isn't there a perfect way? I used to yearn for a golden finger, but now that it's in front of me, I'm conflicted again. Inadvertently, Ji Fei's mind was stirred, and she slowly lifted her hand, starting to compare from top to bottom. Option 1. Skip, Option 2. Skip, Option 3. Skip, Option 4. Skipped. Actually, my fingertips hesitated for a while. Option 5. Skip, Ji Gu. Tang Sanyi just slapped Ji Fei from behind, and his strength was not heavy, but the sudden shock directly shook Ji Fei's whole body. Bang! Ding dong, congratulations on choosing option 6 to receive special martial soul blessing. Your choice will be displayed when you awaken your martial soul. I hope you can break free from the title of salted fish through your own efforts. Let's go. What just happened? My hand seems to have touched something very amazing. What is the 6th option? Ji Fei is confused. Ji Fei was momentarily confused. My mind suddenly felt blank, and my body couldn't help but tremble. My wriggling lips seemed to want to say some vulgar language. He looked at the 7 choices that were gradually disappearing in his mind. He wanted to cry, but tears had already condensed in his eyes and now seemed to be spinning non-stop. He then looked at Tang San standing beside him and suddenly felt a sense of melancholy in his heart. He seemed to be constantly comforting himself, and in the end, he was still a powerful person. Tang San noticed that something was wrong with Ji Fei's situation. How could he feel a violent aura spreading? He looked at Ji Fei with a somewhat puzzled gaze, and suddenly saw Ji Fei jump up in place and then extend his hand to forcefully push towards his side. Tang San seemed to see something was wrong and quickly dodged with a sharp dodge. Then he turned his gaze back to Ji Fei. Ji Fei's palm made a rustling sound in the air, indicating that the strength he had just exerted was definitely not small. Suddenly, he realized that Tang San was so sharp that he dodged past. Ji Fei then withdrew his hand and smiled awkwardly, touching his own head. Are you quick to react, young mistress? I was originally hoping to see the results of your cultivation, but I didn't expect you to be so agile. Not bad, not bad. You have the potential to become a blacksmith in the future. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. My choice. My choice. You damn mistress. If it weren't for my lack of means, I would really want to kill you. Tang San felt a little helpless and said, Ji Gu, why do you always talk about forging iron like Dad? It's just forging iron. What else can you make? Alright, you still don't understand this. You'll find out in a few days. Ji Fei turned around and shook her hand in frustration. I've walked home. Yes, I didn't read it wrong. Ji Fei turned around so calmly, and he kept nodding his head. The originally wriggling corners of his mouth gradually calmed down. Maybe this is all fate, it's all fate. I was born with a strong faction of destiny. What kind of system, what kind of grandpa, they are all outsiders. Yes, they are all outsiders. I, Ji Fei, must rely on my own strength. Even if I starve to death and get beaten to death in Douluo continent, I wouldn't like the word system. Don't ask, asking is trash. What Ji Fei said. Young mistress, don't think you have any unique martial arts skills that can be amazing. I, Ji Fei, am a modern and highly educated person. Although I don't have many methods, you will eventually pay the price for scaring me today. Blue Silver Grass Kid. Tang San looked at Ji Fei's back as he walked away. Suddenly, how could he feel that his Ji brother was feeling a bit lonely? Perhaps it's an illusion. Tang San muttered to himself, then followed in step with Ji Fei ahead. A gentle breeze blew around, and the forest was mixed with the fragrance of wild flowers. Staring at the blue-silver grass scattered all over the mountains in the distance, Ji Fei's mood became even worse. As she walked, Ji Fei muttered, Tang San, you return my system, you return my rise plan, you return my grandfather's blessing, you return my noble character. The last thing I want to rely on as a person is my own strength. And Ji Fei suddenly thought of some things after awakening her martial soul. She definitely can't stay in this novice village for a lifetime, can she? That's for sure, but what's my way out? Without system rewards and blessings, so it proves that Ji Fei really has to rely on her own efforts to fight. However, this is not important. The uncertainty of the system is too great, and at first glance, those who wrote system articles in their past lives were just fabricating things. How could there be such a dysfunctional system? I just want to satisfy my own desires. Alas, the real Douluo continent is not so simple. What kind of dragon arrogance is just a matter of refining into steel? What is unparalleled in the world is just a self-causal conclusion. What kind of golden finger, you haven't used it yourself, that thing has a lot of limitations. Anyone with a brain knows. Ji Fei fiercely regained her mood. Although she missed out on many novel things, she also gained something. At least she chose a normal path to strength, awakening a special martial soul. What will this special martial soul look like? Based on the current time, it seems that the tool man named Su Yuntao will soon arrive at the Holy Soul Village, right? At that time, everything will naturally be clear. Ji Fei turned back and looked at Tang San, who was lost in thought. She sighed helplessly and finally muttered a sentence. What a sin. It's really a living sin. Woo-woo. The new book period is 2 updates per day, with a minimum of 3,000 words per update. If you have more votes and favorites, add more updates. Your support is my motivation to code characters. Dry drop. Refueling, end of this chapter. Chapter 3. Tang San's True Fragrance Theorem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Tang San's True Fragrance Theorem. Ji Gu, the fire you're burning is a bit too high. If it continues like this pot of rice will be burnt by you. Tang San stood on a bench, holding a spoon tightly and watching the bubbling rice. The sticky rice soup had already bottomed out, and a faint yellow hue seeped out at the edge. At this moment, Ji Fei realized that she had been pulling on the bellows and frantically adding firewood inside, as if cooking was just the heat that would be created when forging iron for Tang Hao. In fact, a big reason is also because all Ji Fei's imagination in her mind for a moment was facing the 7 rising choices she had made, and in the end, she accidentally chose this one. The speed of pulling the bellows slowed down, and Ji Fei skillfully controlled the fire. The originally raging flames quickly returned to a dull level. Tang San breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the originally bubbling and steaming water vapor decreasing. He wouldn't make it so thrilling when cooking normally. If such a pot of rice burns, even his father, who usually doesn't ask questions, should not be happy, right? But Ji Ji's ability to control the heat is really impressive. Zyasanzi, you put too little rice, right? I feel like I can count it clearly. If you put more, there won't be any mention of burning. Ji Fei stretched her neck and shook her head helplessly as she looked at the thin, water-like rice soup in the iron pot with several missing openings. If Tang San doesn't cook on weekdays, the two of them will definitely go hungry. Tang Hao is completely free to do whatever he wants, whether it's cooking or working. He can do it whenever he wants. GGE's rice is running low, so we should save some food. It's better not to go hungry, and it's not good to have too much extravagance. Tang San smiled slightly and flipped his hand to pick up the bowl on the stove to start serving the rice. Quickly, 3 steaming bowls of rice with a thin aroma were served, and then Tang San and Ji Fei placed the rice on the table. How can you grow your body like this? Look at this weak body. I can't even imagine what Tang San looked like when he was forging iron. Ji Fei shook her head helplessly. Not only Tang San, but it can be said that both of them are currently growing. Eating this food every day is obviously not enough to supplement the nutrients their bodies need every day. But it seems that there is no other way. Shenghun village is mainly an agricultural village, and generally, if any family can eat vegetables regularly, it is good enough to evaluate the level of a happy family. So we can't force too much. Dad's having dinner. As usual, Tang San shouted softly towards the door inside the room. Later, a deep and hoarse voice could be heard coming from inside the room, as if there was a special feeling of being weak on the surface but suppressed inside. After a while, Tang San and Ji Fei have been sitting at the table for a long time, but neither of them has moved their chopsticks and has been waiting for Tang Hao to come out. The door curtain was lifted, and a tall and burly figure slowly walked out, with a slightly disorganized gait, as if drunk. Undoubtedly, this is Tang Hao. Feeling around her 40s, Ji Fei's gaze once again fell on Tang Hao. Although she had been together for a long time, Ji Fei also knew some things about Tang Hao and probably knew the reason why he was so decadent. However, seeing Tang Hao like this again made her sigh helplessly. There were several tangled branches on the fluffy and disheveled hair, and the tall body was wrapped in dry skin. The lifeless eyes exuded a sense of decadence, and the patchwork robe seemed to smell a very special odor from afar. It seemed to be a strong alcoholic scent. Yes, it could be smelled from afar. Tang Hao rubbed his sleepy eyes and didn't say much as he looked at Tang San and Ji Fei who were already sitting at the table. Let's eat. Tang Hao sat there and shouted, then picked up his bowl and started drinking heavily. The steaming heat was dissipating, and Ji Fei didn't dare to drink it yet. After all, it was a bit hot, but Tang Hao seemed not afraid of it at all. He took one bite after another and quickly finished a bowl of rice. Dad, just drink slowly. There's still some water in the pot. Ji Gu and I added a bit too much water today, but the taste shouldn't be affected too much. And Ji Gu cooks a good fire, making it seem like he's overused when cooking. Tang Hao casually glanced at Tang San and Ji Fei, but didn't say anything. Then he continued to lower his head and drink the rice from his bowl. This is also too decadent. Why do you feel even more decadent than usual? Is it because you know that Zyasanzi is about to awaken his martial soul? Ji Fei picked up her bowl and drank it one by one. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she exclaimed in surprise, "It's still my cooking method of making iron and burning fire that smells good. But the proportion of water added by the mistress is also very good. There is progress and progress." Quickly, a storm swept through the air. Tang Hao drank 7 or 8 bowls of tea, then put down the bowls and casually wiped the corners of his mouth. He stood up and glanced at Tang San and Ji Fei. "If someone comes to repair the equipment later, you can proceed first. In the afternoon, Ji Fei and I will do it, and I will go to sleep for a while." Tang San and Ji Fei also nodded. After all, this was something they were accustomed to. On weekdays, the two of them seemed very restrained in front of Tang Hao. As for the reason, Ji Fei couldn't figure it out. Perhaps Tang San was a bit silly and sweet, right? It's not easy for oneself to say anything, right? After Tang Hao finished giving his advice, he turned around with a lazy and dizzy look and walked towards the inner room. Dad! Suddenly, Tang San called out to Tang Hao, who had originally reached out and lifted the curtain. Ji Fei had some doubts, but then she was relieved and her heart suddenly became clear. Sure enough, the timeline was aligned. As expected by Ji Fei, Tang Hao turned around calmly, with a hint of impatience between his eyebrows that resembled the way a father treated his own son. Tang San was obviously a bit reserved, but then he pointed to a piece of black iron next to the iron stove near the door and said to Tang Hao. Can Dad give me this piece of iron to use? Do you want to forge iron? Oh, this is actually an iron block containing iron essence. What's wrong? Ji Fei chose to set fire. Are you planning to forge iron and become a blacksmith in the future? Tang Hao's gaze moved lightly and quickly shifted to Tang San. Tang San quickly nodded. This was not only something he was considering, but most importantly, he also had to create some hidden weapons. In his opinion, the profession of blacksmith is definitely the best disguise for making hidden weapons. Dad, you are also getting old. Although Ji Gu is helping you with the fire and share some of the workload, it is also very tiring. In a few years, I will grow up again and learn how to make some agricultural tools. That way, Ji Gu and I can take on this family together, and you can rest, Dad. Isn't he drinking every day? His body collapses faster. Ji Fei muttered beside him. Tang Hao looked at Tang San and Ji Fei, and seemed to think of something in a daze. Did you set fire? Did you also choose to forge now? But the blacksmith is pretty good, but Ji Fei seems to have some ideas. In a daze, Ji Fei felt a strange sensation released from him, a very subtle feeling, as if someone was peeking at him. Quickly, Ji Fei concluded that her cleverness was definitely detected by Tang Hao, but she was not afraid of anything. Do you also want to teach me how to make iron? Tang San can easily enjoy the true fragrance, but it is obviously impossible for him. The Chaos Cloak Hammer technique is a good technique for honing his soul power and physical body. Coupled with the unique martial soul Haotian hammer, it is absolutely powerful to the extreme. Ji Fei believes that even if her awakened martial soul is some strange existence, as long as she can learn one or two pieces of the Chaos Cloak Hammer technique, she will definitely accumulate a lot of immeasurable capital for herself. Uncle Tang. Ji Fei felt that her opportunity had also come, and immediately called out to Tang Hao. What's wrong with Xiafizi? Tang Hao realistically pulled a stool from the side and calmly took it down. He then casually picked up the iron that Tang San Gang had just pointed to and started playing with it. Tang San also looked at Ji Fei with some confusion, obviously not knowing what Ji Fei was thinking in his heart. Ji Fei felt a little flustered and then looked at Tang San with a touch of deep affection and solemnity. She then turned her gaze to Tang Hao and said, Uncle Tang, I also want to learn how to forge iron with you. Oh. Why do you also want to learn how to make iron? Isn't it good to make a fire? Tang Hao looked at Ji Fei with a hint of playfulness and interest. Ji Fei concluded that Tang Hao had definitely discovered his own cleverness. Actually, I have always wanted to learn the art of forging iron from Uncle Tang, but for some reasons. I didn't dare to tell Uncle Tang, I just wanted to start with some small things. But the third son is right. Uncle Tang, as you are getting older, I cannot burn fire for the rest of my life, let alone keep the third son forging iron. This is really tiring, and I feel sorry for it. So I also want to take advantage of your time teaching the third son, and I can learn one or two songs by the way. Then, I can take turns forging iron without others saying that you are biased and keep letting the third son work hard. I have always been comfortable burning fire. After speaking, Ji Fei felt like the last sentence she said was a bit exaggerated and even tugged at her own image, but she had no choice but to say it out loud. It was difficult to recover from the disaster, and she could only watch it change quietly. Tang Hao's expression was a bit cold and stiff. His gaze was fixed on Ji Fei, and Ji Fei's gaze was also very firm without any feeling of inner emptiness. On the other hand, Tang San on the side couldn't understand the current situation. In his previous life, he was born in the Tang clan and didn't even have the chance to study the hidden weapons of the Tang clan. He didn't learn much about these seemingly worldly wisdom things, and he's not yet 6 years old. The current situation seems somewhat awkward. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The complementary relationship between divine fire and artifacts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The complementary effect of divine fire and artifacts, 4,000 character chapter for collection, ha ha ha. Tang Hao's sudden laughter made Ji Fei, who had become increasingly nervous, suddenly tremble like a tiger, slowly revealing a buildup of turbid air. And Tang San beside him clearly felt a bit confused. It seemed that he had never seen his father smile so heartily since he remembered, had he? But what's going on now? Okay, Xiafizi is right. If you always make a fire, someone might say I'm biased. Tang Hao's expression stiffened. So I want to ask you two a question. What do you think is the best blacksmith? The best blacksmith. Tang San pondered for a moment, seemingly thinking of how to answer Tang Hao's question, and then spoke slowly. Dad, I feel like a blacksmith who can make artifacts is even the best blacksmith. Upon hearing this, Tang Hao pondered for a moment. First, he nodded and then shook his head. There was no expression of satisfaction or dissatisfaction in his eyes. Then he looked at Ji Fei beside him and said, What do you mean by the best blacksmith? The best blacksmith. Ji Fei naturally knew what Tang Hao meant by this sentence, but obviously he didn't want to say anything bold and grandiose. He just acted plain and ordinary. A good fire, combined with what Xiao Sanzi said can make the most powerful artifact in the whole continent, is considered the best blacksmith. I remember Uncle Tang once told me that no matter what kind of blacksmith you are, the first thing you need to do is to be able to control the heat of the tools you are making. And this time, Tang Hao nodded slightly satisfied when he heard Ji Fei's answer, but then shook his head as well. This made both Tang San and Ji Fei feel a bit at a loss. Both of you are right, but neither of you is comprehensive. As he flipped the iron block in his hand back and forth, Tang Hao then asked in a slow voice, What kind of material do you think the artifact should be made of? Or what kind of fire is needed? Nature uses the best and most top-notch materials. Any fire is sufficient. Tang San looked at Ji Fei somewhat bewildered and said, Shouldn't Ji Gu be the fiercest flame? How could ordinary fire forge divine weapons? Ji Fei was slightly lost in thought and let out a sigh in her heart. Perhaps this was Tang San's nature. All pursuits are the ultimate, all pursuits go in reverse, as long as they can achieve their goals and improve themselves, they can be abandoned. Well, Xiaofei is right. Tang Hao smiled slightly and then looked at Tang San. Xiao San, you must remember that if you use the best iron, fire, and materials, even if you are a beginner, you can still make the artifact that everyone dreams of. That kind of blacksmith, even if he talks about breaking the sky, is just an outsider, and as Xiao Fei said, only blacksmiths who use ordinary fire and materials to make divine weapons can deserve the title of divine craftsman. Can ordinary fire and materials make divine artifacts? Tang San seemed to feel that he had learned a lot of knowledge today that he had never understood before, and even more unexpectedly looked at Ji Fei. He didn't expect Ji Gu to know so much. He was truly a spicy man who had been burning the fire with his father for so long. Junior, you should know that Lu Yao knows that Mali has seen people strike iron for a long time. It seems that I am just like burning a fire beside Uncle Tang. The effect of burning a warm fire for a few hours is different from that of burning a hot fire for a few hours or tens of hours. Ji Fei smiled slightly and looked at Tang San. Although she wanted to talk about divine fire, she suddenly realized that she was not Tang San's ultimate pursuit personality. All she could predict was just 8 words: let nature take its course, be fearless and know. Okay. Lu Yao knows horsepower, and over time he sees people's hearts. Xiaofizi's words are great. Tang Hao clapped his hands and looked at Ji Fei with even more admiration in his eyes. Uncle Tang praised me too much. I just followed Uncle Tang for a long time and learned some insignificant truths. It is precisely because of this that I feel more and more that forging iron is also a discipline and a life. Well, that's good. Tang Hao's eyes flickered slightly as he scanned around and finally stopped at a 50-centimeter iron block on the blacksmith's table in the distance, along with a similarly sized iron block next to him. Since both of you want to learn forging, you need to take a look at your own comprehension first. The third party first uses a hammer to forge this iron block 10,000 times. Xiaofei will first set fire to the third party, and you also need to learn Xiaofei's methods of setting fire and controlling the temperature. Then you can take turns coming, and Xiaofei naturally needs to forge 10,000 first. At the same time, you also need to teach Xiao San the method of controlling fire. Professor Xiao San's method of controlling fire. Actually, Ji Fei wanted to reject it. With a personality like Tang San that pursues perfection, he really can't teach. He just knows a little about controlling fire. How can he teach others, and it's still Tang San? But now there is no reason to refuse. If you want to study on the way, it is obvious that you must first pass the test given to them by Tang Hao. Moreover, it is impossible for beginners like them to control fire while forging iron, which may not have been related to the original work. After all, they are not senior blacksmiths like Tang Hao, so it is necessary for him and Tang San to help each other for a while, and then learn from each other's strengths and weaknesses. In Tang San's eyes, what he was considering was that what Tang Hao gave them were iron blocks with numerous impurities, and even if he were to forge them, it would probably require a lot of effort to waste. But these don't matter. I can definitely control myself to the most perfect completion of my father's test. Can I fall behind Ji Gu? If you want to regret it now, it's still possible. In fact, it's also possible for the two of you to keep cooking. Tang Hao yawned and slowly stood up, apparently ready to go back to sleep. Nature won't regret it. Dad, I'm willing to give it a try. Tang San and Ji Fei both expressed their determination to learn to forge iron with a firm tone. At this moment, Tang Hao looked at the two boys with some surprise, and then said calmly, "But even if you learn to forge, don't forget to cook. This is natural." Definitely. Humph, if we didn't cook, we might have starved to death long ago. Alright, you two can solve it yourselves. After finishing speaking, Tang Hao turned around and entered the inner room to sleep. Now there were only Tang San and Ji Fei left, looking at each other as if their heads were empty for a moment. Ji Fei suppressed the joy in her heart. Isn't this the goal she has always wanted to achieve? Ha ha ha, I finally succeeded now. If it were so simple, I wouldn't have burned the fire for so long. Upon second thought, it seemed that Ji Fei had negated this strange idea that suddenly surged out of her. This could not have been said so. If it weren't for her dedication to burning the fire, she wouldn't have had her own answer today, would she? Anyway, there is a great connection between the two. Strive to learn how to forge iron before awakening your martial soul, and then you will definitely be able to learn the chaotic cloak hammer technique that is enough to hone your physical body. Thinking of this, Ji Fei tightly clenched her fists and couldn't help but feel a palpitations in her heart. Let's go. At the beginning, we need to control the temperature and burn the iron for a period of time. During this time, both of us can work together, and we don't really need to control the temperature. Only when it's about to take shape, do we really need to control the temperature. Ji Fei and Tang San picked up the iron block on the blacksmith's table and placed it in the deep groove where it was fired. The black mark inside seemed to be telling of its past. Tang San also nodded. Although he had never made it or burned it before, he often observed the cooperation between his father and Ji Fei from the side, and could see many things. After all, with his own wisdom, he can naturally ponder many, many things. Boom! Under the guidance of Ji Fei, Tang San successfully learned the first step of controlling fire. Yunwen Iron Stove, Ji Fei was also very surprised and worthy of being a true protagonist-level character. His ability to apply analogies and inferences was a shame to himself. He couldn't help but feel grateful that he had learned it early. Otherwise, if Tang San had learned it all early, what else could have happened to him? Putting the iron block in, Ji Fei slightly recalled Tang Hao's technique when he was forging iron. He didn't mean to deliberately learn it, but just thought about how he could grasp the hammer and stand in the most effortless position to conform to mechanics. After all, he was not a freak, and there were many age restrictions before the age of 6. Ji Gu, what posture are you in? Tang San saw Ji Fei with his legs wide apart, one foot leading behind the other and standing on a small platform. Instead, he held the hammer inside his hand with some strange techniques, some novel and some at a loss. Cough cough, this is a professional technique for forging iron. Although it's different from Uncle Tang's, it suits me. You should also find a more comfortable position to forge iron yourself. Ji Fei was very satisfied, feeling that his overall strength could be extremely dispersed now, and he could also save a lot of effort. After all, most people can't eat enough. How dare you put all your energy on it? Although we study very seriously, we still need to combine it with the actual situation, right? I see, but I feel like my dad's posture suits me very well. Tang San picked up the hammer on the side, which was much higher than him. He immediately lifted it up, which frightened Ji Fei. The strength was too strong, wasn't it? Later, Ji Fei looked at the hammer in her hand, which was only slightly longer than her wrist, and awkwardly threw it aside. Then, she also dragged over a hammer that was similar to Tang Sanxiang's. Huh, it's really heavy, but it's okay, but do you really need to wave this hammer 10,000 times? It seems a bit abnormal. Ji Fei looked at the crackling red iron block and instinctively swallowed a mouthful of saliva as Tang San, who had already lifted his hammer and started pounding continuously, with a slightly nervous expression. Isn't this really human? Why do I feel like the gap between myself and Xia Sanzi is even higher than the sky? It seems like it's Shen Gong, right? Xuanyu hand. Sure enough. Ji Fei saw a faint halo on Tang San's hand as he swung the hammer, and in an instant, he also knew what was going on. Damn it! What kind of thing is this? Even if my Ji Fei hand is broken and my flesh is rotten today, I have to beat all these 10,000 times. Only by enduring hardships can I become a master. Ji Fei let out a loud shout, then lifted the hammer in her hand and struck it fiercely. Dang 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 dang. And Tang San beside him was also shocked by Ji Fei's words. Watching Ji Fei lift the hammer, Tang San felt an invisible aura of Wang Ba constantly flowing. Why could I lift such a heavy hammer and wave it so coherently and smoothly? That's naturally why he practiced Shen Gong. Although he himself knows that the power of Shen Gong has not yet broken through to the first level, he can almost have the power of an adult. But he can't understand why Ji Gu also has such power. Do you have to endure hardships in order to become a superior person? In the inner room, Tang Hao opened his eyes and listened clearly to two different and uncoordinated sounds of hammering. He also smiled slightly. Strength is really good, but 10,000 strokes is not that simple. Day by day, Ji Fei and Tang San began the devil's journey of forging iron. At one moment, Ji Fei burned and controlled the fire, and then continued to strike. At another moment, Ji Fei taught Tang San how to finally control the fire. Then Tang San tried Ji Fei to continue to strike, but he would attract some gods to pay attention to Tang San's fire control techniques. And perhaps the most approachable thing these days is when Tang San, Tang Hao, and Ji Fei forged together on the blacksmith platform, right? But Tang Hao did not care about Ji Fei and Tang San, and relied entirely on them. After forging agricultural tools, Tang Hao would buy some wine and then return to his room to sleep on his own. Ji Fei may be considered the most hard-working. However, 4 or 5 days later, he felt that his hands were no longer his own, and his wounds were cracking, revealing a layer of fair white flesh. The extremely painful feeling made Ji Fei want to give up for a while, but in the end, it made him firmly restrain and strangle such thoughts at the moment of sprouting. He said it in his own words. Only through suffering can one become a master. Since I have chosen to awaken my special martial soul and achieve the peak of Douluo continent through my own efforts, then I need to bear all the hardships myself. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. I have better perseverance, so I succeeded. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. I have better perseverance, so I succeeded when. Ji Fei tightly grasped the hammer, and after a period of continuous training, he suddenly realized that the scab on his hands had miraculously returned to its original shape. If it weren't for watching the iron block he was beating shrink day by day, he would have thought that what he had experienced before was just a dream. But this is definitely not a dream. But what really happened before our eyes? Moreover, after a few days of forging, Ji Fei seems to have been activated with the genes for forging iron, and it has become increasingly convenient. At some point, Tang Hao's figure stood next to Tang San and Ji Fei. His gaze was slightly surprised as he stared at Ji Fei's movement of lifting the hammer, dropping it, and striking it on the iron block. Suddenly, there was a hint of shock. Is this the Chaos Cloak Hammer technique? No, it's not familiar with the Chaos Cloak Hammer technique. Chaos Cloak Hammer technique is an extreme control of a person's own strength and a more profound touch of power. The most obvious way is to use force, and it's obvious that Xiaofei is using this method now. Compared to Xiaosan's innate divine power, Xiaofei is very intelligent, but it seems a bit strange. Is there such a posture that seems a bit strange? It seems that the strength that can penetrate the whole body firmly stands in place, and the lifting and falling of the hammer form a bow and arrow like opening and closing, as if it were natural. If you hit the iron in this way, it seems to save a lot of effort, and then combined with the borrowed force similar to the random cloak hammer method, this method is completely using the iron as a pastime, but it can still achieve the originally set goal of 10,000 strikes. The more he looked at it, the more he felt shocked. Even in such an instant, Tang Hao felt a sense of self-doubt. As a divine craftsman with the absolute title Douluo, his strength and forging methods are almost on par with Tang San's current situation. As for the reason, it is also very simple, that is the use of the random cloak hammer method. The special way of the random cloak hammer method can merge the power released from oneself during forging and the power of the hammer falling on the iron block, and then form a multiple type feedback on the forged object again. This is the most terrifying existence. But now, Ji Fei seems to have taken a different approach by reducing the strength she needs by half through her own methods, but she can still achieve her set goals. There is also one thing that Tang Hao finds very difficult to understand. At this moment, Tang Hao couldn't help but ponder endlessly. After several days of training, he must have some special abrasions and soreness on his body, right? This was what made him feel strange. Tang San seemed to have nothing to do every day, and his jade-like hands were completely like a little girl's home. And it only takes 1 or 2 days for Ji Fei to recover from the original minced meat, which is simply unrealistic. How could a child under 6 years old have such a strange recovery ability? If we know that most people need to have at least the soul power they use before they can achieve enhanced self-recovery, but what's wrong with Xiaofei? In Tang Hao's opinion, he should have a thicker skin towards my son, so there was no special situation on his hands. However, what puzzled him the most was undoubtedly Ji Fei's strong recovery ability. Ha! I feel like this iron block has almost reached the level I expected through my unremitting efforts in forging. Ji Fei also smiled as he looked at the shrinking iron block in the forging furnace. He now felt that his whole body was filled with a vast power, and the release of this power was continuous, as if he could constantly extract the power of life from the earth. Forging iron is definitely a physical task that requires honing one's patience, which is very difficult to understand. However, from various aspects of exercising oneself, forging iron is indeed the best choice. Ji Fei is now looking forward to learning the so-called Chaos Cloak Hammer technique, but just thinking about it now is enough. Although Tang Hao has taught him how to forge iron, Chaos Cloak Hammer technique may not be easy to obtain. Taking a look at Tang San beside her, Ji Fei let out a deep sigh. Indeed, through the cultivation after birth, such a weak third son possessed power that was countless times greater than himself. He was only able to reduce his own loss of strength through his knowledge of mechanics. As for the self-recovery of injuries in his hands, Ji Fei only felt that his physique was better and there was nothing special about it. Nowadays, I am able to achieve a coherence of about 500 hammers at once, and if this coherence theory consumes only half of my own strength, it means that my own limit should be around 700 to 800. Currently, Xiaosanzi has around 500 hammers, so I can steadily suppress them. After all, I have my own considerations, and these things can only be carefully considered after awakening my martial soul. There are still many things that I need to consider now. If you want to ask Ji Fei what he cares about, it's also very simple, because the more he recalls some special things, the more he feels that this Douluo continent will definitely not be so simple. He originally only wanted to stay by Tang San's side, waiting for Tang San to become a god when he was over 10 years old. But when I think about it now, it's really not right. There are too many pros and cons involved, and if I think about it from another perspective, my intervention will definitely change the direction of some routes. Although I really want to be a passerby, it's obviously not that simple. Perhaps in the eyes of some people, Ji Fei seems too boring. Why have they become so spineless as travelers? Is it really smearing the name of the time traveler? Even Tang San can become a god through hard work. Isn't it okay for you, Ji Fei? If you say that, Ji Fei will laugh. Effort. If you work hard and use it, what do you need a genius for? Only successful people will say, work hard and use it, and only successful people will know that only talent is the most unique. Tang San can be said to be one of the few twin martial souls in the mainland in the past century. He himself has a unique existence. If you don't believe it yourself, you can think about why only he himself can be recognized. Isn't it because he has two martial souls as exclusive containers? If he really only has one martial soul, then the final conclusion of achievement is not necessarily true. For Ji Fei, the abnormality of twin martial souls is that they can reach a perfect existence. Their first martial soul reaches the level of a tidal Douluo and then helps the second martial soul obtain a soul ring. At this time, their advanced soul power can be said to exist without any limitations. To be honest, as long as there are enough soul beasts in the current Douluo continent that have been around for 100,000 years or tend to be around for 1,000,000 years, then you can have almost perfect soul ring configurations yourself: red, 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 red. But now everything cannot be concluded so quickly. Ji Fei has not yet awakened her martial soul, and all the unknowns are too great. What kind of special martial soul will her unintentionally awakened choice of projects bring to her? Shouldn't it be too bad, right? At least based on the general properties of the golden finger, it wouldn't be too bad, but as long as it's a soul ring, Ji Fei can only accept her fate. Even if she tries to cultivate the first soul ring, the limit is just over 400 years in her memory. Although she can be on par with Tang San at the beginning, she will gradually widen the gap, especially after Tang San awakens the Blue-Silver Emperor. The gap will be infinitely enlarged. I'm so annoyed. I don't want to be a licking dog, but I feel like I can't handle it. It's really speechless, isn't it? I'm just a terrible navigator, right? I'm really speechless. Ji Fei grabbed the hammer fiercely and smashed it onto the iron block. With a powerful bang, Tang San on the side was startled. Ji Gu, what's going on? How do you feel? A bit annoyed? Illusion, right? Later, Tang San just shook his head and gathered his strength again. Under the control of Shen Gong, his strength reached its peak level in such an instant. Young mistress, are we about to awaken our martial soul? Ji Fei casually asked Tang San. Is it a martial soul? It seems like I have some impression. I heard other people in the village say that they will awaken when they are 6 years old. Tang San replied while tapping on the iron block. How did you plan? Ji Fei said calmly. What are you planning on? What are you planning on? Tang San was obviously a bit confused, and his speed of hitting the iron block slowed down. Then he turned his head and looked at Ji Fei with some surprise. It's just about your own plans in the future, and your own goals. Ji Fei felt Tang San's puzzled gaze but didn't make contact with him, so he continued to hit the iron block on his own. Do you have a goal in the future? Tang San murmured and then shook his head. Forging iron, that's what I said before. When my dad gets older, I plan to replace him as a blacksmith. Ji Gu, didn't you also plan on doing this before? Ji Fei was taken aback for a moment, feeling a bit speechless in his heart. Tang San was indeed a little more innocent now. Perhaps it should be said that he had not witnessed the colorful and splendid world of martial souls himself. This is Tang Hao at home. And when Ji Fei was about to answer Tang San's question, suddenly an older voice outside the door rang out, with a hint of anxiety. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Prelude to Awakening Martial Souls. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Prelude to Awakening Martial Souls. As is well known, the Douluo continent now has 2 empires. One is the Heavenly Do Empire where Ji Fei and Tang San currently live, while the other is the Jitsi Star Luo Empire, and the Holy Soul Village can be said to be located at the junction of the 2 empires. Martial soul is not only the main tone of the Heavenly Do Empire, but also the main tone of the entire Douluo continent. Only when a person awakens their martial soul can they be said to be recognized by the Douluo continent. No one does not have a martial soul. Martial soul can help you self-sufficient in daily life, and it can also help you improve your current life. It can be said that a good assistant and a good horse. Martial souls can be further divided into weapon martial souls and beast martial souls, and literally, it can also perfectly explain what kind of existence they are between the two. The scope of the martial arts soul is very broad, and it can also be said that the martial arts soul of the entire Douluo continent occupies the main tone, while the beast martial soul has always been synonymous with soul masters, and can also be said to be synonymous with strength. And Ji Fei had only seen the wonder and uniqueness of the so-called martial soul from the book, until he truly witnessed the existence and realism of martial souls in this world. It was only then that he truly knew how splendid martial souls were. The soul of the Ho warrior can be omitted by leaping up and down the ridges and plowing, thus giving rise to soul masters specializing in plowing. It can be said that there are no cows in this world, and these are not even considered laborers, and even more noble than Tang Hao's professional blacksmiths. Of course, the blacksmiths here can only be said to be ordinary blacksmiths, and the divine craftsmen are naturally unimaginable. Between the rubbing and scratching of the scythe soul, one can harvest crops and possess some combat power. As for whether one can attach a soul ring, it is unknown. After all, if a person awakens the scythe soul, no one wants to continue practicing, as the significance is not significant. Ji Fei heard a sudden sound coming from outside the door and her body suddenly shook. She thought to herself, here we are, the old Jack with his own grandfather aura has finally arrived. The one waiting below should be Su Yuntao with his own poison milk buff. What is the aura of an old grandfather? That naturally means touching, comforting, and interacting with you, and you can succeed. What is a poison milk buff? That's as long as he says you can't do it, then you can definitely succeed. I don't know how much stronger this aura is than those so-called fake protagonists. Although it may seem unfair to oneself, being a mascot is also possible. You two little guys are actually forging iron. Tang Hao is really lazy. It's okay not to cook on weekdays, but he still wants to start enjoying his life so early. When old Jack walked into the house, he looked at Ji Fei and Tang San, who were forging iron, and their originally gentle faces became a bit gloomy. His mouth also began to complain about Tang Hao. Old Jack, why did you come? At this moment, Tang Hao also walked out slowly, nodding faintly as he watched Ji Fei and Tang San, who were still forging iron. They have good patience. Tang Hao, I'm talking about you. You've been sleeping soundly all day and letting two children make iron for you. Don't you even take a look at how these two children have become thin. And you just ask them to make iron, holding such a big hammer. Faced with old Jack's endless chatter, Tang Hao didn't dislike anything at all. He just yawned and walked to the other side, scooped a bowl of water with a spoon, and then gulped it down. Grandpa Jack, don't be angry. It's the two of us who are willing to learn how to forge iron. This not only helps us share some of Uncle Tang's work, but also helps us better repair and manufacture more agricultural tools for the people in the village. After all, it would be too tiring to always ask the people in the village to use martial soul farming to work. Yeah, Grandpa Jack. My dad works hard enough on weekdays, and now we can do what we should do. Looking at the two children, old Jack nodded helplessly and then said in a resentful tone, Even the two little dolls are more sensible than you. Tang Hao, just keep going like this. Tang Hao didn't care about old Jack. He just looked at Ji Fei and Tang San with an extremely ordinary gaze, and in his eyes, he had his own unique plan. Come over, children, let me take a good look at you, old man. Old Jack's kind smile instantly made people feel incredibly friendly, and there was also an extremely comfortable feeling. Ji Fei knew that this was the effect of the old grandfather's halo. Here, is Ji Fei going to start accepting the baptism of Grandpa's aura? Grandpa Jack. Hello Grandpa Jack. Ji Fei and Tang San put down their hammers and wiped the sweat from their foreheads, but they walked towards old Jack calmly. Tang San appeared very respectful. Perhaps this is the gentle and refined feeling developed by his ancestors in his past life, right? Why bow down? Shouldn't you be holding your fists? By the way, how are you, Mr. Jack? I'm polite in the lower Tang San's chamber. Ji Fei stood still and said, It seems a bit inappropriate. Forget about the old man's halo and just rub against it. Old Jack doted and raised his hand, placing one hand on Ji Fei's head and the other on Tang San's head. He slowly stroked it, seeming both emotional and comforting. Seeing this scene, Tang Hao on the other side seemed to become a bit impatient. Isn't this causing trouble? Is it not known that the iron blocks raised by you when Yun may be discarded, as they are already at the most critical stage of iron forging? Village Chief, you have something to do. What are you doing here? You're so old and shouldn't be going down anymore, right? Tang Hao said with a hint of impatience. Originally, this old Jack was not much older than him, but he showed a feeling of absolute seniority, which Tang Hao seemed very dissatisfied with. At this moment, Ji Fei was very excited and said, the old man touched the halo, so that's how it feels. Come travel. Touched by old Jack, titled Douluo. Becoming a god. You can do it too. Old Jack didn't pay attention to Tang Hao. Anyway, he didn't have the remaining energy to argue with Tang Hao about something less important. He came here today for a crucial matter, not to argue with you, Tang Hao. Tang Hao, Xiao Fei and Xiao San are both about 6 years old this year, right? So, should they also participate in this year's martial soul awakening ceremony? Old Jack's gaze remained peaceful and he seemed to love these two very polite children, but his father and uncle were a bit strange. Oh. Really? Let's join then, a few days later. Tang Hao asked calmly without any expression. 3 days later, since you agreed, I will come and pick up these two little dolls to awaken their martial souls. Old Jack is also aware of Tang Hao's laziness. Obviously, if he only told Tang Hao the time to awaken his martial soul, he would never send two children to awaken his martial soul. Tang Hao nodded and did not show any surprised expression, only a slight sigh. Time has really passed a bit fast. Spring has passed and autumn has come, and the third son has also grown up. It seems that Ji Fei's background should also be told to him, right? When Tang Hao seemed to think of Ji Fei's background, his expression suddenly became ugly. Let's forget it. Maybe it's better for him never to know, after all, the name of the 7 emotions and the remaining evil. What is the awakening ceremony for Grandpa Jack? Compared to Ji Fei's indifference, or rather, Ji Fei should have been in the excitement of being touched by the aura of the old grandfather before, Tang San showed a curious baby. Although he had a rough idea of what the martial soul was, he was also completely unaware of everything else. And through this moment, Ji Fei seemed to know why Tang Hao didn't like to see old Jack so much. It's too verbose. Tell Tang San about a so-called awakening ceremony that lasted for more than 10 minutes, and he even danced with his hands and feet. The strange appearance was like dancing an old disco or even a group of old men and women dancing square dancing somewhere well known as respecting the awakening ceremony. To put it simply, it means that when you reach the age of 6, you will awaken your own martial soul, and then stand inside a broken circle. After passing by the poison milk Su Yuntao in the martial soul hall, you will pretend to be 13 on your own and scare the fools. Then you will exaggerate it. If you awaken a martial soul, he will judge it, and our poison milk master will naturally not evaluate it. He will only evaluate it when it comes to the halo moment. Your martial soul is useless. Forget it, there's no need to test any soul power. Anyway, it's just a useless martial soul. Even if it's your innate full soul power, what's wrong? If you are born with full soul power, Su Yuntao will spiral 360 degrees and eat shit. Sleep, eat, sleep. I will eat as much as you pull. Su Yuntao, am a battle soul master at the martial soul hall with a level of over 20. Dare you provoke me? If I say you are a useless martial soul, you can succeed. Coming to travel, humiliated by Su Yuntao, titled Douluo. Becoming a god. You can do it too. When old Jack mentioned the new concept of the great soul master, Tang San became even more novel and immediately began to ask further questions. Then old Jack continued to talk incessantly, perhaps in his own opinion, it was his concern for the younger generation. Look at how seriously the third person listened, and then take a look at Xiao Fei next to him. He laughed happily as he watched. Now, let's have our Jaffiadan the classmate translate what old Jack called the Soul Master level system for everyone. Cough, 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 cough. Cough, 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 cough. Why say that? Why? If you want to ask why, first let me see our Tauga's true face before we talk. As for now, I can only ask you a few questions in reverse. There are thousands of fan novels, but without poisonous milk, everything is ruined. Tauga's poisonous milk has become a legend. He didn't insult you. How could you succeed, Iron Jew? Can you milk Douluo? Can you milk God? Can't you? Can't you? So, Brother Tao is mighty. Brother Tao is domineering. The title of Douluo is far from enough. We just need to remember Brother Tao, and don't worry about the rest. Perhaps after becoming a god in Tang Dynasty 3 days later, our Tauga will once again come to the Sea God village and gaze at the magnificent village, reciting a sentence. I once achieved the Sea God with golden sentences, and I once achieved the Sea God's dream with both hands. I am poison milk. Don't call me Lone Wolf Douluo in the future. Su Yuntao will change his name to Poison Milk Douluo. Su Yuntao, children, I'm amazed at your bones. This child is disabled. Su Yuntao, you useless martial soul, even if you have soul power, it's useless. Let's make friends, the gods of the future. TSK, it's just so realistic and authentic. After old Jack's confession, Tang San was truly exposed to the one-sided appearance of the world called Douluo continent. Soul Master, Great Soul Master, Soul Zun, Soul Sect, Soul King, Soul Emperor, Soul Saint, Soul Douluo, and Title Douluo, and as long as you reach the level of Title Douluo, you can give yourself a powerful title. Soul Saint. TSK, why not change the name to Yuntao Village or Novice Village and reserve the Sea God base station? Alright, I'll leave first. You two must work hard and not be like that decadent guy. Soul Saint will definitely protect you two and awaken good martial souls. Tang San nodded. Today, he really learned a lot of new knowledge, and all of these novel knowledge gave him a broader imagination of the world. But Ji Fei on the side didn't think so. I might as well pray that Tauga will protect me and give me poisonous milk. It feels like Tauga is even more powerful than the system. Although I can awaken an extremely special martial soul, unfortunately, it's just one. So, what exactly makes something special? Poison milk, please protect me for the first time. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Tang San's obsession, Tang Hao's sudden realization, Ji Fei. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Tang San's obsession, Tang Hao's sudden realization, and Ji Fei's upcoming happy life. Not bad, I didn't expect you two to forge these 10,000 so quickly, which really surprised me. Tang Hao's indifferent gaze fixed on the dark iron block held in the hands of Ji Fei and Tang San. The iron block in Tang San's hand was not very large, and the whole body was not so smooth. There seemed to be some black charcoal powder mixed in the exposed cracks on the surface, but if you observe carefully, you can see that there was a faint black halo flickering inside the iron block. On the other hand, the iron block in Ji Fei's hand was not much different from Tang San's. However, from the appearance alone, the iron block forged by Ji Fei looked very round and did not have the seemingly bumpy feeling. Moreover, from a distance, it was as delicate as a black jade. So heavy. Ji Fei felt that the weight of the iron block he was holding in his hand could reach at least half of his body weight. From the originally large iron block to the current size that was only held in his hand, it seemed to have shrunk by 3 times. What do you two feel after forging these 10,000 times? Tang Hao stared at Ji Fei and Tang San. Previously, Ji Fei and Tang San's initial ideas on forging could be roughly integrated, but it was obviously not yet mature. That's why Tang Hao first allowed Ji Fei and Tang San to personally understand for a while. It's not just about looking at their qualifications, but also their understanding. Refined into steel, even ordinary fire can forge refined and sharp iron. Just like what you said before, no matter what kind of material, as long as you continuously refine it through forging, you can achieve the expected existence. By then, even ordinary fire can forge truly ideal artifacts. But the more I do this, the more I feel that what Ji Go said before is not right. Ji Fei was taken aback and said, "Isn't that right?" Tang Hao's eyebrows furrowed slightly, but soon he was occupied by strong interest again. "Oh. Can you tell me what Ji Fei said before is not right?" Tang San slowly exhaled a breath, glanced at Ji Fei, and then looked straight at Tang Hao. Ji's previous focus was on fire, and from another perspective, he emphasized a person's own level of training, thus saying that only by enduring hardships can one become a good person. Tang Hao nodded, yes, what Ji Fei said was also reasonable. But Ji Gu overlooked one thing, which is a person's own talent. Although hard work in the future may be useful, it will definitely not be the first priority. It should be postponed to the third priority. In my opinion, a person's talent should be the first energy, second, and third, which should be related to the theory of heavenly endowments. A talented person may fail, but a person without talent is destined from the beginning to have a high chance of failure. Ji Fei's eyes slightly gathered, and she pursed her lips with a cold smile. She also knew in her heart that Tang San's personality was indeed like this. The reversal of priorities may not be so significant, but the depth of obsession may not be comparable to anyone else. If we were to explain Tang San's words from Ji Fei's perspective, it would be very simple and sharp. Give an example. My Tang San's achievement is related to my innate advantages. I have Shen Gong, twin martial souls, and great Qi luck, so all I need to do is involve a little effort. Oh, no, I should say that I can reach a level that others cannot achieve in my lifetime with just a little bit of diligence. As for why I can bear so much pain and suffering, it's naturally very simple. Tang San has obsession and ambition. Effort and talent. After a moment of contemplation, Tang Hao's gaze changed slightly. He did not reject Tang San's claim of talent, nor did he affirm it. Instead, he turned his gaze to Ji Fei and said, "Xiao Fei, what do you think of Xiao San's words? And what kind of enlightenment do you have after forging these 10,000 times?" Ji Fei shook her head and then turned to Tang Hao, saying, "It's my foolishness. I didn't have as much as the third party thought, and I didn't want to say anything about the third party's words. Everyone has different opinions, which cannot be unified. So you just haven't realized anything." Tang Hao seemed a bit angry. "This is not." Ji Fei shook her head secretly. Sure enough, the closer the plot approached her, the more she felt like she was living in the mouth of a tiger. She had to be cautious in her words and actions. Maybe some people will feel that Ji Fei is like a white-eyed wolf now, but if you carefully savor the current environment and what will happen in the future, then you won't imagine it like this, then you say. Tang Hao leaned back on the chair, swaying slightly, quietly waiting for Ji Fei's answer with the creaking sound of the chair. Tang San also turned his gaze to Ji Fei. He felt that what he had just said was not wrong, and even said it was very correct. If one's talent had been discovered early in their past life. If I had a better background and become a legitimate disciple of the Tang clan with legitimate roots, would I still have the consequences of falling off the cliff like I do now? No. Absolutely not. If Uncle Tang really wants to ask, then I can only answer 4 words for Uncle Tang's reference. Ji Fei looked up at Tang Hao, who was carefree, and said, "Let's return to simplicity." Returning to simplicity. Tang Hao's expression was dull, muttering these 4 words as if savoring some deeper meaning. Ji Fei saw that Tang Hao seemed to be lost in thought, and in an instant, he also exhaled a breath of air that had accumulated in his chest. Indeed, being flashy is the truth. Where is there anything to return to simplicity? To be honest, it's almost like a single kick at the door. Ha ha ha. Return to simplicity, what a return to simplicity. Tang Hao laughed heartily, then stood up, and not only did Tang San and Ji Fei not know what Tang Hao meant by this coherent action, but also what kind of wind to draw. Sure enough, even the title Douluo has a slight feeling of not knowing its meaning. Both of you are right. It's not easy to extend these through forging. Tang Hao looked at Ji Fei and Tang San. So next, you need to achieve one more goal, which is to forge the iron block you are forging to the size of your fist. Remember, it's your fist, not mine. Hiss. Tang San suddenly took a cold breath, while Ji Fei beside him was lost in thought. He was not surprised. Tang San had no idea but to pound him. After all, it wouldn't take long for him to forge an iron block like Xiantian Gong into a small fist, but he himself was different. It's easy to reduce the appearance, but it's really difficult to handle the weight. If the volume of the iron block decreases, it means that its density will also decrease. In this way, the molecules will merge together through unrestricted impact and then recombine. The kinetic energy required for all of this process undoubtedly requires me to move and wave the hammer myself to achieve. While Ji Fei was thinking about how to solve the problem, Tang San beside him muttered to himself in some surprise, "Is it really possible to do this? You should forge it yourself well." After instructing Tang Hao not to turn back, he walked out the door. From the moment Tang Hao had just turned around, Ji Fei noticed that there seemed to be something wrong with Tang Hao's expression, as if there was a faint accumulation of excitement. It seems like there's such a natural calmness. Maybe I overthought it. If Tang Hao could just smile normally, it would really burn high incense. How could there be such a special expression? Later, Ji Fei stared at the dark iron block in her hand, emitting a black halo, and fell into deep contemplation. On the other side, Tang San chose to start directly and continued forging. "I didn't expect to suddenly break through the soul power level, and tracing back to the origin was because of a sentence from Xiafizi that didn't even awaken his martial soul. It seems like I adopted a disaster in the future myself." If he awakened his martial soul again, maybe even if he had an appointment with her, he would have to take action. Xiasanzi's future route was his own choice, but Ji Fei. "I have already decided your path for you, Tang Hao." After leaving the door, Tang Hao said a faint sentence and suddenly disappeared from the original position. 3 days passed hastily, and during this time, Ji Fei and Tang San continued to climb the mountain and practice in the morning. Of course, Ji Fei was just playing and didn't have any practice decisions. It could only be said that he was watching Tang San practice. Although he wasn't jealous, he also felt somewhat uncomfortable. After Ji Fei and Tang San returned home, their lives were basically eating, forging iron, sleeping, and going back and forth. If you want to ask Ji Fei the strangest thing these days, it is that Tang Hao has changed his previous decadence and laziness, choosing to constantly observe the process of forging with Tang San. No, it should be said that he has been staring at himself. This situation made Ji Fei very uncomfortable. He always felt that Tang Hao was hiding something from him, and it was like a shocking secret. However, when Ji Fei thought about it himself, he had no idea where to start. Besides this strange thing, there is also one more thing, which is that Tang Hao's recent countdown of time has clearly shown that he has warmed up too much, his appetite has increased, and his alcohol tolerance is as terrifying as swallowing a whale. What is the situation caused by this situation? So naturally, the restless stomachs of Ji Fei and Tang San are just growling in Ji Fei's own words, "I just want to say. Oh, has this Haotian Douluo realized? Or is it an epiphany? Do you know that eating is the biggest thing in the world? Or is he just trying to teach the two of them how to forge iron by eating his own body first?" This is obviously impossible during this period. Ji Fei also suddenly felt a strange change happening in her body. Tang San was able to achieve such a long period of forging without showing any discomfort due to possessing the power of Xiantian Gong, but Ji Fei also found that there was no feeling of discomfort on him during this period. At first, Ji Fei felt like she didn't have as much workload as Tang San, so she didn't feel any discomfort. But soon Ji Fei erased this idea and ultimately attributed it to her strong body. Of course, that's just for a moment's thought. I'm probably the kind of skinny figure I have. Xiao San, Xiao Fei, Grandpa has come to pick you up. Today is the day to awaken your martial soul. Old Jack arrived at the blacksmith's shop on time, perhaps because he was tired of Tang Hao or because he had a dispute with Tang Hao about the authenticity of the legend of the Holy Spirit Village Soul Saint. This time, he didn't even walk in and only called out for Ji Fei and Tang San outside. "Go ahead, you two must not delay cooking at noon." Ji Fei Chuan, when this sentence drifted with the wind, couldn't even eat enough and felt pitiful, "But I'm finally about to awaken my martial soul. Poison milk buff, brother Yuntao. I really want to see how majestic and peaceful your appearance is now. I also hope you can insult me. Don't praise me. That way, I will feel like I will be ruined for the rest of my life." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. This is different from what I imagined, Brother Tao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. This is different from what I imagined, Brother Tao. Finally, I'm about to awaken my martial soul. Ji Fei and Tang San followed old Jack's side. Ji Fei felt so nervous for the first time, even when she knew she was crossing the Douluo continent, she probably wasn't as nervous as she is now. There were no two reasons, because today is the time to judge herself. Determine what? That is naturally the judgment of whether one will be a lifelong genius or a lifelong mediocre in the future. But when you think about it, almost all martial souls are inherited, right? Not to mention 100%, it is also largely inherited from one of his parents. For example, the third son has the surface blue silver grass and the hidden Haotian hammer. In other words, he inherited the martial souls of his parents. Who are my parents? When I asked Uncle Tang before, he seemed to be very reserved and sometimes even got angry. Ji Fei shook her head. She couldn't control so much now, and her excitement grew even more intense as she thought she would see us Tauga in a while. You must apply a poison milk buff. This is the martial soul hall in our village. Perhaps you didn't know it before, did you? How impressive is it? Back then, the soul saint of our holy soul village also awakened his martial soul from here, and finally achieved the position of soul saint through his own efforts. Old Jack pointed to a house in front of him that seemed to be built with rotten wood, which looked many times more dilapidated than the house Ji Fei currently lives in. Okay. It's really great. Spectacular. Ji Fei didn't dare to compliment, but she also pretended to be surprised with a completely unexpected expression. There aren't many children in Holy Soul Village, and there aren't many who are the same age as Ji Fei and Tang San. It can't be said that the talent in Holy Soul Village has declined, but in fact, there aren't many talents at all. One by one, they looked dumbfounded and giggled. Sigh, it seems like it's a good thing not to interact with them on a regular basis. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would all get this kind of vibe. Ji Fei and Tang San stood together, while the other children crowded together. They seemed to look down on Ji Fei and Tang San, which made Ji Fei feel that the confidence of these children could not help but dare to look down on the future sea god. TSK TSK TSK, you idiot who didn't even do anything. Ji Fei and Tang San, both generations of human beings, naturally knew the simple and common truth of valuing wealth over poverty. Ordinary blacksmiths in the Douluo continent are not a respectable profession, they are simply skilled. As for whether they are really capable or not, who knows? Brother Tao. That's Su Yuntao. Compared to Tang San's bland gaze standing there, it was now Ji Fei's turn to get excited. He looked at a tall young man in front of those 8 children and wished to rush forward to observe this seemingly ordinary but magical poisonous milk powder cloud. After a moment of calmness, Ji Fei also began to carefully examine Su Yuntao, then nodded. Unlike ordinary magical fan fiction, Su Yuntao was born with gentleness and elegance, seemingly not arrogant, and seemed to fit the original work very well. A pair of starry eyes gazed at the unknown place, with a sharp contrast between the white decoration and the black cloak behind it, giving a visual impact. An invisible and spreading pressure seemed to envelop the entire wooden house. The badge representing the personnel directly under the Martial Soul Hall is exposed, as if it is a symbol of his identity, which is the source of his own arrogance. And there are 3 shimmering starlight particles shining on the 3 swords above the badge, which is different from his identity, it is a symbol of his strength. Second ring Soul Master. Respected Soul Master of the Martial Soul Hall, all the children from the Holy Soul Village who are going to awaken their martial souls today have gathered. Next, we still need to trouble you to take action. Old Jack looked at Su Yuntao with great respect. Make a move. It's better to call for a golden mouth, Ji Fei muttered. Ji Gu, why do you have a golden mouth? Tang San looked at Ji Fei with some confusion. Oh, it's nothing, you'll gradually find out in the future. Su Yuntao smiled slightly, then bent down slightly to show his willingness to repay. Then he said to old Jack, the village chief spoke seriously. This is our job, and we can't say it's troublesome or not. I have also visited many villages during this time and have seen many good seedlings and abandoned martial souls in them. Therefore, I still wish that your Holy Soul Village can awaken a good martial soul seedling. Old Jack instantly felt a flattered expression and quickly bowed to thank him. Then I'll rely on the good words of the great Soul Master, he said. All right, my task today is also a bit heavy, and there are several villages waiting for me to awaken fresh blood for them. Let's start. Subsequently, Su Yuntao walked towards the so-called raised wooden platform, which contained a large bundle that seemed to contain the materials and tools needed to awaken the martial soul. The old Jack then turned around and looked at the children who were divided into 2 waves. On one side was a small group of 8 children, who seemed very reserved and somewhat afraid, fluctuating in their small eyes. On the other hand, it was usually Ji Fei and Tang San, who were standing side by side, seemingly very calm without any panic. Old Jack clapped his hands and said, Did you also hear what Lord Soul Master just said? You are all fresh blood from our Holy Soul Village. I hope you must obey Lord Soul Master's arrangement to awaken your martial soul in an orderly manner. Lord Soul Master blesses you, and our Soul Saint ancestors will also benefit you. Although what you said is exciting, to be honest, there are some things that cannot be accomplished through shelter and prayer. I have walked through many villages, and among them, the proportion of abandoned martial souls is more than 99%, and those with soul power can count them clearly with their fingers. I feel like Su Yuntao doesn't have any pride at all. Is this a fake Su Yuntao? Ji Fei looked at the gentle and elegant Su Yuntao, and every action seemed to be calmly waiting for the old village chief to finish speaking. Where did she feel that anxious? Is it difficult for my true poisonous milk brother to be kidnapped? Damn it. At that moment, Ji Fei seemed to have fantasized about a magnificent and long picture. On the quiet and restless path, our Tauga looked up arrogantly at the distant sky, thinking to himself that they were all a group of useless martial souls with no idea of speaking. Forget it, go to the next Holy Soul Village. Bah, that Holy Soul Village is a place where birds don't poop. The old village chief named Jack is also a strange old man who talks nonsense. What kind of carrot martial soul does he have? Damn it, it's really a place for talented people. In a daze, Su Yuntao felt a sharp pain in his neck and finally fell to the ground in response. Woo woo. Upon waking up, Su Yuntao only saw himself lying naked in a grassy area, surrounded by many soul beasts resembling apes, swallowing their scorching breath and staring at him. He was covered in a cloth and could only make a whimpering sound, leaving only endless terror. As a direct subordinate of the Martial Soul Hall, he naturally knows what the soul beasts resembling apes around him are. River Fantasy Ape. Dong dong dong. A wonderful, ape Mount Taishan, is going on fiercely, and what has taken its place is the now incredibly gentle and easy-going, Su Yuntao. Where did I think of? Ji Fei felt like she had completely lost her mind, but the Su Yuntao in front of her was really different from what she had imagined. Let's take a look later. Ji Fei stood behind Tang San. According to reason, when Tang San thought of blue silver grass and detected his innate full soul power, Su Yuntao began to release the power of poison milk. At that time, he could also see if Su Yuntao was exactly what he had imagined. Ah, what you said is not wrong. Prayer is useless, but perhaps this is the best way we can think of. Old Jack also shook his head helplessly, with the words "desolate" appearing on his old face. Then he turned around and walked out of the martial soul hall. So what remained were these children and Su Yuntao. Su Yuntao gave a gentle smile and then his gaze fell on the group of children one by one. He then said gently to Ji Fei and Tang San, "Come on, children, stand in a row." Upon hearing this, the children who were originally crowded together quickly stood in a row. For these children, the seemingly elegant young man in front of them seemed to have a very solemn special pressure constantly releasing and enveloping them. "Xiao San, please stand in front, I'll be fine in the end." Ji Fei pointed to the end of the line, and Tang San nodded. Then, a queue of 10 children was formed. "Well, I want to see what kind of monster Su Yuntao is or a true poison milk buff you are." Ji Fei smiled slightly, and everything was naturally under her control. "My Ji Fei is also a person who is good at deep strategic planning. Don't be too reserved, I'm actually just over 10 years older than you. My soul power is at level 26, so I am the level of the great soul master in the martial soul hall. Next, you will embark on the true path of martial soul cultivation. Remember that no matter what kind of martial soul you awaken, don't be too excited or too sad. Remember to face the sea and spring flowers will bloom, and gold will always shine." Su Yuntao looked at the children in front of him, seeming somewhat restrained. Some lowered their heads, some pinched their clothes, while others kept moving their small hands. Ji Fei was dumbfounded. "You've been talking so much nonsense that even I feel like I'm losing out. Should you take out the arrogance of the great soul master and scold us harshly? Even if it's just 1 or 2 words of trash, it's okay. One more thing you should remember, no matter what happens later, don't be afraid." Subsequently, Su Yuntao took out the tools and materials required for awakening the martial soul from the bundle. In fact, it was just a few lacquered black pebbles resembling huge ones, as well as the seemingly most precious crystal-like crystal spheres. When Su Yuntao took them out, the crystal spheres emitted a faint blue halo, which would be dazzling if placed at night. Subsequently, Su Yuntao squatted down and placed the painted black stones one by one, forming a very complete hexagonal ring that seemed very plain and without any special features. Then Su Yuntao pointed to the child who was ranked first, and then pointed to the hexagonal circle. The meaning was also very clear. You just need to stand inside. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Disruptive Martial Soul Awakening Ceremony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Disruptive Martial Soul Awakening Ceremony. Children, don't panic, carefully feel the subtleties contained in it. A lone wolf. Possession. Su Yuntao looked at the child standing in the hexagonal circle and smiled slightly. Suddenly, his originally black and white starry eyes flickered with a deep green halo. Accompanied by waves of air pressure, Su Yuntao's originally elegant face was covered by layers of gray and black fluff, which split rapidly and quickly spread below his neck. In an instant, Su Yuntao's entire body suddenly increased a lot, and his originally not long hair also drooped in an instant. He opened his mouth, and his originally evenly long teeth also underwent a special change. The teeth exposed on both sides were very sharp, and even a hint of cold light could be seen. Ah! The young man who had already stood in the hexagonal circle suddenly jumped out, and a little tear seemed to gather in his frightened eyes, swirling back and forth. He couldn't believe why his originally kind elder brother suddenly became so scary. It is exactly the same as the wolf in the story of the wolf told by his mother and him. Is it because I didn't listen to my mother and didn't wash my face this morning that I said the big bad wolf came to eat me? Mom. Wow. Mom. Pushi. Ji Fei covered her mouth and suppressed her smile, feeling helpless as she watched the children bouncing around outside the hexagonal circle. At the age of 6, she was still crying and looking for her mother. TSK, but from the perspective of this lone wolf martial soul, this person should be Su Yuntao, not a fake, definitely not the situation she had enjoyed before. Child, don't panic. Didn't I just tell you earlier? No matter what happened, don't panic. This is my martial soul solo wolf, one of the beast martial souls, and my current situation is just a normal phenomenon formed under the stimulation of the martial soul. At this moment, if Su Yuntao stood up completely, he could stand against the roof of this wooden house, and his slender claws spread out in front of him for a moment, feeling that the heads of these children under his claws were no different from watermelons. Is that a soul ring? One white, one yellow, corresponding to a 10-year soul ring and a 100-year soul ring. The feeling of this soul ring is somewhat subtle, as if there is an invisible pressure releasing on it. It should be said that it is the spiritual will of soul beasts, right? Ji Fei looked at the two dazzling soul rings floating on Su Yuntao and pondered for a moment before giving her own unique analysis. On the other hand, Tang San was somewhat novel, but he didn't show any signs of panic. After all, his background in 2 generations is still there. Ji Gu, is this the function of martial soul? Tang San looked at Ji Fei, who was indifferent, and asked with a hint of doubt. Ji Fei nodded and said, the martial soul of Su Yuntao is a beast martial soul. The magical use of a typical beast martial soul is possession. After being possessed, the beast martial soul can assimilate the body and also use some special effects of the beast martial soul. Just like Su Yuntao's lone wolf, with his martial soul possessed, Su Yuntao can fight in the form of a werewolf, possessing powerful claws that may even bite people with his teeth. Is it so terrifying? It's not good to bite people, is it? It feels a bit vulgar. Tang San's gaze once again shifted to Su Yuntao's body and stared. What's so vulgar? It's just a clever use of martial soul, Ji Fei joked. Where do things between life and death come from? What kind of nonsense? No matter how much you say, if you die, you have no right to argue. However, this martial soul is indeed somewhat unique. Although I used to enjoy some forms of martial soul in books, now that I see it with my own eyes, I feel that it is a very subtle existence, as if it is another living creature attached to the body and coexisting. Brush. 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 6 consecutive sounds of breaking through the sky rang out, and the brilliant soul power surged on Su Yuntao's body. The gray-black fur seemed to be instantly lit up, releasing an extremely dazzling black light. From a distance, it was very sharp and dazzling. And by the way, the soul power aura fell one by one on each stone of the hexagonal circle that had already been placed on the ground. Wow! Soul power was released like a thin mist, and the faint golden halo gently caressed everyone like a spring breeze. A fresh and refined feeling arose, and Ji Fei instinctively stretched her body and took a deep breath, feeling so comfortable in her heart. These halos are only a small part that have dispersed, because most of them have turned into an inverted cover that usually wraps around the little guy standing inside the hexagonal circle. The little guy was obviously a bit flustered, but he seemed to remember the embarrassment of calling his mother just now. He instinctively clenched his fist and closed his eyes slightly to cover up the terror he felt in front of him. And this is just his own feeling. Because when the suspended golden halo truly landed on him, his tightly held hands suddenly loosened, and his slightly closed eyes slowly opened. The fear on his face was also eliminated. At this moment, he seemed to calmly lift his head and gaze at the halos and clouds above his head. And next, the seemingly homeless golden halo surged into the little guy's body, like floating and sinking particles, fitting in one after another. That boy doesn't seem to have any special feelings, he is still in that state of dull expression and unable to extricate himself. Extend your right hand. Su Yuntao's green eyes stared fixedly at the changes in the boy's body, and his gentle voice seemed to become somewhat urgent. The boy seemed to have lost control of his body at this moment. Subconsciously, he raised his right hand, and in that moment, countless golden dots seemed to surge out of his body. The surging golden dots quickly dissipated again, as if unable to withstand sustained output. In an instant, a miniature Ho was presented to everyone. The mini Ho is exactly the same as the real one, but it seems to lack some heavy feeling. It can also be said that the mini Ho lacks close contact with the soil. Seeing the solidified Ho soul, Su Yuntao also shook his head helplessly and said, "It's not a good start." Ho soul. According to the configuration of the Soul Master team, it's completely useless. Whether it's control, assistance, or strong attack, it has no meaning. The little boy also slowly recovered from his dazed state. He looked at the Ho suspended in his hand and was also somewhat surprised. He just felt that his body seemed to be controlled by others, and a fresh vitality poured into his body. "Here, little one, this is your martial soul. It's a very delicate Ho. It seems that farming can be more convenient. Now let's test if you have soul power. If you have soul power, you may be able to walk a very different path in the future." Suyintao smiled gently, as if even though he knew that the boy had awakened to nothing more than a Ho, he didn't seem to want to resist. This script is not quite right. However, Ji Fei, who had always been under control, was somewhat skeptical that she had read a fake original work. Su Yuntao was actually encouraging this Ho martial soul. Is this too disruptive to one's own intelligence? Even a Ho was encouraged, so why did the blue-silver grass of Xiaosanzi behave so unsteadily? And I remember that the little girl's martial soul should also be blue-silver grass, right? Su Yuntao doesn't seem to be very resistant to that little girl's behavior, does he? How could it be that when Tang San arrived? Is it the protagonist's inherent attribute of striking faces to attract enemies? Ji Fei couldn't believe it. So. Respected Soul Master, what should I do to test my soul power? The little boy asked with some embarrassment. Su Yuntao smiled slightly and said, "It's very simple. You first stimulate your will to imagine that your body is a container for martial souls, and then you should first receive your martial soul into your own body." The little boy began to try, and for a moment his face turned red as if he had gathered all his strength in his palm while imagining his small body as the space for this Ho to belong to. Ji Gu, does he want to defecate? Why is his face so red? Tang San pointed to the little boy and then said to Ji Fei. "Ah. Shit. Yes, it's possible." Ji Fei nodded subconsciously. "Do we need to get him some paper?" Tang San thought for a moment and then shook his head to give up. After the little boy's absolute unremitting efforts to turn his little face slightly blue, he finally collected his martial soul Ho back into his body. "Come on, now put your hand on this crystal ball." Su Yuntao's wolf paws emitted a faint cold light, and in an instant, it made people feel the sharp light blade touching him. The little boy tentatively reached out his hand and placed it on the crystal ball. "Unfortunately, you don't have any soul power. But don't be too discouraged, remember that the sunshine always comes after the wind and rain." Su Yuntao shook his head slightly regretfully after his four eyes met. "Wait on the side now, don't be discouraged. Although you can't become a soul master, you can still have your own path to follow. The function of the whole martial soul is to cultivate land quickly, and your parents may also be pleased for you." The little boy clearly looked a bit at a loss, but he also walked aside with a vague understanding. Today's novelty may be the last lesson he can learn in his life. Tauga is just Tauga. This way of encouraging people feels fresh and refined. Ji Fei covered her mouth and smiled. Next, the usual storyline began, with children standing in the hexagonal circle one by one. Su Yuntao continued to stimulate his soul power one by one to awaken their martial souls and test their soul power. In the blink of an eye, there was only a little girl left, along with Tang San and the last Ji Fei. And Ji Fei can be considered to have seen all kinds of martial souls. Hoe, sickle, shovel, and none of them had any soul power in them. Ji Fei could feel that even if one of the people in front of them could have level 1 soul power, it would make Su Yuntao happy for a while, right? Is it possible that everyone will praise it? And Su Yuntao, as always, still encourages these children. Although the awakened martial souls do not meet people's expectations and do not have soul power, they must not be discouraged, nor should they blame others for it. Although your martial soul is like a sickle and does not have any soul power added, you also need to think about how warm it is to be able to wave the sickle martial soul and kill the wheat while winning the applause of your parents in the golden wheat waves scattered throughout the mountains and fields. Child, do you have many question marks? Don't worry, it's okay. Although your martial soul doesn't have much combat power, you can work. Remember that labor is the most glorious. Ji Fei. I, Ji Fei, would like to call you the strongest toxic chicken soup. In society, I am Tao Gu, and there are too many people who don't speak harshly. Disrupting the previous integrity of the great soul master and the direct subordinates of the martial soul hall, it has become so limitless. Poisonous milk turns into beneficial milk, harsh words turn into good words, urging young people to grow up and strive to dress up for Douluo Star as soon as possible. I hope the Martial Soul Hall can award them the honorary medal of Home Soul Squatting Master. End of this chapter. Chapter 10, that's exactly what happened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10, that's exactly what happened. Little girl, your martial soul is blue silver grass, which is a relatively delicate grass. Although it is not a powerful martial soul or has little attack power, it is also very good for viewing. Take a look at the clear water chestnuts of the leaves and the slowly winding young leaves inside, all of which emit a youthful and uplifting atmosphere. Su Yuntao looked at the little girl in front of Tang San with a very gentle smile, even though she looked fierce with wolf fur covering her sharp teeth and exposed. With just this smile, perhaps even if he said that the little girl's martial soul was a divine-level martial soul, some people would believe it, right? I feel like there's always a smell in the air. Ji Gu, isn't blue silver grass just an ordinary grass? Can it also become a martial soul? And it seems that Lord Su Yuntao also admires blue silver grass very much. Tang San's gaze remained fixed on the young girls who awakened their martial souls, as if they were searching for the uniqueness of their martial souls, while on the other hand, they seemed to be sensing something. I don't know anything about this, but even though it's a blue silver grass, it's not that bad, right? You should know that there are no useless martial souls, only useless soul masters. If there is a will, there is a way, as long as you work hard. Ji Fei stopped speaking at this point, and if he continued speaking, it was likely to provoke Tang San's rebuttal. After all, in his opinion, talent seems to be more important than hard work. Is there only a useless soul master without a useless martial soul? Tang San kept reminiscing about Ji Fei's words, and his gentle forehead furrowed for the first time. It's your turn, Ji Fei pointed to Tang San and said. Oh. Tang San's thoughts instantly pulled him back and he hurriedly walked over. His gaze immediately shifted to Su Yuntao, who smiled at him warmly, and then slowly walked into the hexagonal circle, quietly waiting for the process of awakening his martial soul. Don't be nervous and just relax, Su Yuntao said as he began to inject soul power. There seemed to be a layer of fuzzy sweat slowly condensing on his forehead. After all, he was just a level 26 soul master. It wasn't so easy to stimulate his martial soul to output soul power for a long time. Fortunately, there are only 2 little ones left. Put in more effort. Tang San began to awaken his martial soul. Ji Fei's gaze was firmly fixed on what was happening within the hexagonal circle for the first time. In an instant, Su Yuntao's soul power turned into a golden hood and covered Tang San's body, then slowly turned into golden particles and poured into Tang San's body. Subsequently, golden patterns gradually appeared on Tang San's thin body, and Ji Fei could clearly see that the golden ups and downs on Tang San's body seemed to transform into a solid existence. The extremely dazzling light even suppressed the light released from Su Yuntao's body in an instant. Su Yuntao's expression also froze in an instant, and a smile seemed to gradually appear at the corner of his mouth. If such a spectacle appeared before his eyes, there was no need to look at the high probability that the awakened one would be a high-level martial soul. Even a less advanced martial soul should not be much worse. Have you ever helped so many children in the village awaken their martial souls without an ideal one? Have you discovered it here today? Congratulations. Excited. Immediately, he seemed to have forgotten the feeling of fatigue caused by his prolonged output of soul power, and his dark green eyes stared fixedly at the constant changes in Tang San's hexagonal circle. But with the passage of time, Su Yuntao's face seemed to undergo a drastic change in an instant, from the original mild joy and excitement to the instant gloom. His expression and facial features seemed to coalesce into a lump. I see. I said Su Yuntao's attitude toward Xiao Sanzi is so different. Ji Fei knew from the change in Su Yuntao's expression that Su Yuntao was able to change from his previous gentle demeanor to an atmosphere that even showed his contemptuous arrogance. His expectations for Tang San seemed to be the greatest, even with the children from all the villages he had walked before gathered together. He could feel from Tang San's special situation that he should be able to awaken a very powerful and advanced martial soul. Although this was also correct, Tang San's martial soul was only displayed by blue-silver grass. The huge sense of disparity instantly falls from a fantasy paradise to a real hell, and this extremely distorted transformation is probably unbearable for anyone, right? This is the fundamental reason, and it seems to be the beginning of poisonous milk. But for me, it seems like I am missing an opportunity to obtain this intangible toxic milk. In Ji Fei's opinion, only by being mocked by Su Yuntao's contemptuous tone can he obtain this so-called invisible poisonous milk opportunity. However, now Su Yuntao may lose any interest in Tang San's awakening of a blue-silver grass. Even if Ji Fei awakens any kind of martial soul, it may not be able to arouse his disdain, right? And if Ji Fei really awakens, what kind of amazing martial soul is probably only the praise and excitement on Su Yuntao's face. At this moment, Tang San looked at the blue halo slowly emerging on his right hand, and the stretched and tender blue leaves slowly relaxed. Bathed in the floating golden halo, he seemed to be able to grow freely. Blue-silver grass. I thought it was some kind of advanced martial soul. It seems like I imagined it on my own. In such a place, how could ordinary people awaken high-level martial souls? Su Yuntao shook his head in disappointment and said, "Next." At this moment, Su Yuntao was extremely disappointed. He wished he could quickly awaken the martial soul of the last child and leave this place that made him heartbroken, without looking back. There would always be such a person who lost his interest, which was too helpless. "Uncle, haven't you tested my soul power level yet?" Tang San saw that Su Yuntao had already started calling Ji Gu to awaken his martial soul, and then he reminded me. Su Yuntao suppressed the feeling of desolation and helplessness in his heart and said to Tang San, "Little guy, take a look at the blue-silver grass you awakened. The little girl just now has 0-level soul power. Blue-silver grass is so ordinary that it can no longer be an ordinary martial soul, and it is impossible to have soul power. That's it, little guy. Don't waste my time, I have to rush to the next village. Dear Great Soul Master, I'm not in a hurry. You can test Tang San's soul power first. Please test my soul power." Ji Fei looked at Su Yuntao with a slight smile. How could she not detect it? How can you say that the effect of your poisonous milk should also be demonstrated? Otherwise, what's the use of you? Tang Sanlu looked gratefully at Ji Fei, then turned to Su Yuntao. There was a glimmer of hope in his pure eyes, as if he wanted to know his soul power. In fact, he wanted to know whether his Xiantian Gong was related to the soul power of his soul master. Su Yuntao looked at Ji Fei, then at Tang San, and then shook his head. Forget it, his job is to help these 6-year-old boys awaken their martial souls. Since it is his essence, he must treat everyone equally. Even if he knows this is blue-silver grass, he must complete a set of procedures to truly awaken his martial souls. Moreover, when faced with such sincere requests from 2 children, he naturally cannot resist them. After all, who was not a boy who once dreamed of wielding a sword to walk the ends of the world? Unfortunately, I was born with the skill of moving bricks and martial soul. Okay, let me test your soul power before awakening his martial soul. Su Yuntao knew it was just a test of soul power, which wouldn't waste too much of his time. It would be better for this child to give up, at least when he grows up and thinks about awakening his martial soul, he won't blame himself. This can be considered a good thing he has done. How could blue-silver grass possibly possess soul power? How could such a naive, weak, and ordinary martial soul possibly possess soul power? Ordinary sickles and hoes may be able to steadily suppress blue-silver grass's attributes, right? Su Yuntao then signaled to Tang San to retrieve his martial soul and place his hand on the crystal ball to test his soul power level. Compared to the children with flushed faces or wasting a lot of time, Tang San's speed was very fast. However, in an instant, he withdrew his martial soul and then placed his hand on the crystal ball. Is your intelligence so high? Alas! Unfortunately, the martial soul is a blue-silver grass. Perhaps the speed at which the blue-silver grass recovers the martial soul is also faster than others. After all, no matter how complex such a young grass is, it won't be too complicated. Su Yuntao believed that the reason Tang San was able to retrieve the blue-silver grass in such an instant was because the blue-silver grass was not a special martial soul and did not require too much energy consumption. Shit! 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 And as Tang San's little hand slowly rested on the crystal ball, the originally silent soul power seemed to suddenly surge, accompanied by a series of azure halos that devoured the crystal ball like surging waves. The vertical and horizontal blue line segments are bound together like messy blue-silver grass. Su Yuntao was stunned. Yes. At this moment, his expression froze. In his fixed memory, as long as this crystal ball can emit a faint light, it represents that this person has soul power. And now, such a strong light constantly flickers, what should it represent? I can't believe it. Hiss. Impossible. How could a child have innate soul power? And the martial soul is still blue-silver grass. Su Yuntao exclaimed in surprise, he couldn't believe his eyes at all. The dark green eyes stared fixedly at Tang San's right hand, which touched the crystal ball. He was surprised and fell silent for a moment. Innate soul power. Ji Fei's gaze on the side was also slightly touched. He clearly saw Tang San burying his left hand backwards in an instant. It seemed that he didn't want others to know that he actually had another martial soul. Sure enough, it seems. Ji Fei seemed to have her own plan brewing, as she pondered slightly. May I ask what Uncle's innate soul power is? Tang San naturally didn't understand these conventional terms, and his philosophy was to ask if he didn't understand, so he began to ask Su Yuntao. After Su Yuntao became excited, he seemed to have a regretful expression on his face. The explanation for innate full soul power is also very simple. For example, if you have the same martial soul, the same age, and the same starting point of cultivation, but you have innate full soul power, which is only 10 levels, and another person's soul power is not high or low at 5 levels. Therefore, you are leading others by 5 levels in terms of innate advantage in soul power. Don't underestimate these 5 levels of soul power. Generally, soul masters need several months or even a year to achieve it. The most important point is the level of innate soul power, which can be said to determine a soul master's achievement point. The higher the level of one's own innate soul power, the faster the speed of complementary cultivation and meditation in the future. Is innate full soul power at level 10? Can't we continue to improve? Tang San's thoughts were like lightning, and he quickly thought of his Shantian Gong. This is natural. The innate full soul power of level 10 is naturally the highest. How can it be even higher? Let me tell you this. If a soul master wants to break through the level limit of level 10, he needs to absorb soul rings before he can reach a higher level. If he has a higher level of innate soul power, such as level 50, then he must have 5 soul rings himself. So, on the other hand, if you haven't even awakened your martial soul, where are the 5 soul rings from? Tang San nodded, as if he had thought of the reason why his Shantian Gong had never broken through. It seems that those so-called transmigrators' innate soul power of level 50 or 60 is simply an insult to intelligence. I'll just say, where is crossing so simple, and how could Douluo continent be so simple? You idiot with no brain. Ji Fei sighed as if she was completely immersed in an outsider. To put it simply, Su Yuntao's words should be summarized as follows. The soul ring is the key to the next stage and can also be considered a beacon of enlightenment. Uncle, is this the soul ring that flickers on your body? It looks so beautiful. Su Yuntao nodded and said, that's right, this is a symbol of breaking through the soul master level stage. Alas, unfortunately, it's really a pity. When I awakened my martial soul, my soul power was only level 2, but I was able to cultivate it to this extent with the help of the lone wolf martial soul. Alas, blue silver grass is really. Even if you awaken with a hoe and shovel, I could. Alright, you can go aside first. Sigh, it's really a pity that we've reached the extreme. Su Yuntao shook his head helplessly, and the blue silver grass was ultimately an unreal symbol. Forget it, it's no use feeling regretful. It's not a big pity to have a ship already made. There may not be many geniuses like those with innate soul power in this world, but without them, it's equally exciting. It's your turn, stand inside this hexagonal circle. Su Yuntao's slightly settled gaze slowly fell on Ji Fei, and under the gaze of all the children, Ji Fei slowly walked towards the circle. Tang San's gaze was somewhat dull. As he looked at Ji Fei, there seemed to be a special feeling spreading slowly, but this special feeling could clearly not be described in his own words. Blue silver grass. Innate full soul power. I don't know what kind of martial soul Ji Gu will awaken. What is his soul power? From the words of this great soul master Uncle and Grandpa Jack, soul power and martial soul are still very important in this world. So what is Dad's martial soul? Is it? End of this chapter.